Every person has a story, but a story that stays in your head can't change someone's life. If you ever wondered whether your story is worth telling, this is the conversation in the podcast episode you want to catch. Today's guest helps leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators transform their ideas into books that leave a lasting impact. Ghostwriter Madison Fitzpatrick is with us. Madison, good to have you here. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. For you guys watching for the first time, this is They Call Me Mr. U, where perspective is the purpose. So I want to get into our comment for today because there's so much I want to get into. Your journey into writing is definitely wasn't traditional for sure.
No.
I'm a writer myself. I don't write as much as you do. I'm a writer who hasn't written anything published in quite a while. But how would you say a civil engineer becomes somebody who helps leaders and coach people who write books that change lives? How did that happen?
Honestly, it started in childhood because the only reason I can write is because I always loved to read. That's where it all started. I was a book kid. I would stay holed up in my room all weekend with novels and just flip pages. And that's why I'm able to write the way I do, even though I wasn't trained as a writer. I wasn't an English major. I didn't go to journalism school. I was trained as an engineer. But along the way, you have to write essays. I wrote a dissertation for my PhD, and you get this sense that it came easier for me than it did for other people. And that's why it became a career option later in life when I was I had gone from academia to management consulting. And then I decided I didn't want to travel all the time. And so it was like, okay, what's my next step? And I just started writing to fill the gap. It wasn't like, oh, writing's going to be my new career. It was like, here's a way I can make some decent money while I figure out my next thing. And that turned into my next thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Quick side question. So tell us what a civil engineer is and why you felt like that was the move for you.
So civil engineering it's actually pretty diverse. It's like if you think of all the urban infrastructure around you, from buildings to roads to pipelines and sewers, that's all civil engineering. And I actually ended up specializing in transportation. And my research was basically about how we could do better in urban transportation systems. And I did all these crazy computer models of little fake people moving through the world every day. And I'm tweaking the settings and seeing how it changes things. But ultimately, I decided I didn't want to stay in the university system. I didn't really feel like becoming a professor was me. And so one of the ways people often get out of academia when they're at that level, the PhD level, is through management consulting, because these consulting firms will just hire anybody who seems smart. It could be a law degree or a graduate, a business degree. They just want people who can take in a lot of information and figure stuff out. And that's what I did for a little over a year. And that kind of got me my feet wet in the business world. So I was in meetings with C-suite executives, and I was doing interviews with them, and I was giving presentations to them. And that actually ended up being the type of client I work with most often. A lot of my clients are business leaders or executives or investors, business coaches, that type of people.
Okay. I know a lot of folks that are friends of mine, that are colleagues and peers who want to write books or have written books. Biggest misconception about writing a book? You work with so many authors, I figured you would have some keen insights on that. What's the biggest misconception about writing a book?
I think one misconception, and this is less common than it used to be, one misconception that a lot of people still suffer from, though, is that they have to do it all by themselves. That the whole process of writing a book looks like shutting yourself in your office, opening your computer to a blank page, and just typing. And some people can do it that way. But it's not the easiest way. And for a lot of people, it's not the most effective way. One of the things that happens when somebody is a really deep expert in what they do is that they can't remember what it's like to not be an expert. And so they undervalue their expertise. And when they go to try to communicate it, they skip over the basics and they make leaps that their audience won't be able to follow. And that's where having a partner collaborate in the process can be so valuable, because they can stand in for whoever your target reader happens to be and act like that type of person. They'll ask you the questions that will draw out the information your reader actually needs and help you, flesh out the stories and examples that will help the reader understand. And I really feel like the value of my work is some of it's in the writing, of course, but a lot of it happens before the writing, in the conversation, where I'm pushing the author to give me their best thinking. I'm not just taking what you're giving me. I'm saying, what about this? What about that? I don't understand this. Could we frame it a different way? Is anything missing? So that piece of the process can't exist if you work in a vacuum by yourself.
Oh, that makes total sense. There's something I think you might be a good person to ask about this as well, because I have a lot of experts that have been on this show. It's been almost 6 years now, in a couple of months or so, and well, less than that. And it's been a journey, because a lot of times experts come on and they're so engulfed in what they know that they struggle to communicate it on a level that actually moves people or that helps people understand what they're doing and how it's applicable in their own lives. What's your personal growth step, if you will, that kind of help you transition from being a subject matter expert into somebody who can communicate well and then be able to coach others into doing the same, if that makes sense?
I think it all comes down to putting yourself in a situation where you actually have to teach it. And this actually goes back to something I learned when I was in grad school. Part of my funding came from a teaching program. So I was working with high schoolers, I worked with middle schoolers, some undergraduates, and I had to learn how to teach. And you've probably heard this before. If you don't really know something until you can teach it to someone else, right? Like you read it and you think you know it, and you take a test and you pass the test and you think you know it, but then somebody else asks you to help them understand it and you try to explain and you realize you don't really know it, right? So you have to put yourself in that position of having to explain it to someone else, because that forces you to figure it out at a deeper level and figure out how to communicate it. And sometimes you have to figure out multiple ways to communicate it. This was something I actually learned, crazily enough, in ballet class. I started taking ballet when I was like 19 years old. I was not a childhood dancer. I can't even remember why I did it. I think it probably just sounded like fun. And my adult class, and my ballet teacher was amazing at finding different ways to explain the same motion to different people, because those different explanations, you never know who's going to click with which one. And so after all the years that she had been doing it, she had found all these different analogies and different ways to explain, like, this is how you point your toe. This is how you do this motion. So I think that's something that just comes with practice. If you never get in a coaching session with someone, if you never get on a stage in front of people, if you never give a workshop, you're never really gonna get to that level of depth with your expertise where you can communicate it in a way that impacts others. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. We're in a world now where, and I've heard people say this as a published author and somebody who still writes in different forms and mediums, it's challenging when someone says to me, you know what, I'm going to get AI to write this whole book for me. My first book that was actually published was 196 pages. I did write it in about 6 to 7 weeks because I was really inspired. It was a hot topic for me personally, but to get AI to write the entire book, that means stories, analogies. I just don't see it. And it feels like it's becoming more of a way to generate content. What would you say is the quality that makes a a written message by humans impossible to replace? What would you say are some of those qualities?
So the thing about AI is it can smooth out, mediocre writing, but it doesn't know what's in your head until you tell it what's in your head, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
let's say you want to write a blog post about finding your purpose, right? If you just tell the AI, I want 1,000 words on finding your purpose, it's going to pull from every other blog post about this topic that's ever been published on the internet, and it's going to come with 1,000 words. Honestly, it's probably going to sound pretty good, but it's going to be super generic. It has nothing to do with you, right? The people who I know, and I know some people who have invested a lot of time and money and energy in calibrating their own AI usage. And some of them have found that it can be a really effective tool. But those are the people who, first of all, have quite a lot of previously written material that they did themselves, so they can train the AI how to sound like them.
Sure.
And they also, the process to create, let's say, a new LinkedIn post for them is not just like, write me a LinkedIn post about XYZ. It's write me a LinkedIn post about XYZ. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to tell you what I don't like about it, redo it. And that happens a number of times before they get to something that they actually like. Now, that's for short form content. I have found over the last couple of years, as AI has become more popular and my clients are using it, they're asking me about it, long form, like book length, is still a real struggle for the AI. It can do pretty well if you give it like one story to write, one chapter topic to noodle on. But keeping the thread for 50,000 words is not the same as getting 1,000 coherent words for a blog post. It's just what happens. Here's what happens. Because I actually have done, I have a client who tried to do this, who tried to write his first draft with AI as like a collaborative process. First of all, he probably spent a good 50 to 80 hours on it. It's not like it happened in a day. And then when I got the first draft, I started reading and I was like, okay, sounds pretty good. It's not too shabby. Like, we could fix this up. And then I'd get to the middle of a chapter and be like, wait, why are you telling me this? Like, I can't remember how this whole thing I'm reading right now connects back to what I was reading before and what the whole message of this book is supposed to be about. Like, the AI lost the thread. And then I, as the reader, lost the thread. And I was kind of like, now I'm bored. Now I'm distracted. I don't want to keep reading. So that's what I've seen happen with AI. It doesn't know you. And even if you work really hard to try to get it to know you, it can't achieve that level of coherence for that long for a book length project.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see if I try to get in a couple more questions if I can. Now, in regards to, like yourself, Madison, I grew up as a bookworm. It was kind of a curse word back in my day in the 70s. It was kind of considered a curse word, but I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I wasn't a reader and a seeker of knowledge, if you will. Yeah. Dictionaries, encyclopedias, etc. Do you believe that books are the strongest method for a leader per se to build trust and influence, or are there more digital methods that you see that are kind of pushing books from the top of that list now? What do you think about that?
I think a book is part of a portfolio. As much as I love a book, and I think the biggest advantage of it is that it can capture an entire body of work in one place that has staying power, because a book stays on a shelf for a long time. It's not like a blog post that kind of disappears, a social media post, even YouTube videos can kind of disappear down the drain. It's this one thing that can capture so much that it becomes like a cornerstone of your content strategy. But at the same time, you have to recognize that, like, where is the audience getting their content these days? Is your audience sitting around reading books, or are they scrolling Instagram and watching reels? Are they on LinkedIn? Like, where is your audience? And you do have to meet that audience where they are, because reading a book is a real investment of a person's time. And they're not usually going to do it the first time they hear of you. So what the way I see books as part of this content portfolio is it is that cornerstone that you can pull from to create shorter form content that brings people into your book. You know, like one book can generate almost like infinite reels, right? You could pull 30 seconds from that book a million times and post them in a way that kind of starts building that trust and bringing people in. And once someone feels like, wow, I really like Mr. Yu's content, and like I trust him and I want more from him, I've already like watched most of the podcast, what else does he have? That's when they're going to reach for your book.
That makes sense. I like it. All right, 2 more questions for you, Madison. I know your story and your history and your journey to get to this place where you're doing what you're doing. But for those that are watching and listening who may not know what the best route is for them, traditional or self-pub, where do you lean on that?
So the traditional publishing world is in a crazy place right now, because they are struggling to stay alive in a world where, you know, maybe people aren't reading as much, and the self-publishing world is sort of like cannibalizing some of their former
good word. It's word of the day.
Yeah, right? The whole thing is evolving very quickly, and the consequence of that is that it's the publishing world has become more of a winner takes all, where the publishers will invest a lot of money to promote the authors who they know are going to sell millions of copies, because that's where the publisher is actually going to make their money. And everybody else who they're kind of like taking a risk on, they kind of expect you to be able to sell your own book. Yeah. So in old days, it was like, yes, I got a book deal. That means the publisher is going to help me sell my book. Not really anymore. I'm sad to say. They're going to invest in people who already have a platform that's ready to buy from them, which means that if you don't have a platform, like if you don't have an audience that's ready to buy from you, a publisher's not going to be interested in your book. Now, I'm painting with a broad brush here, and there are exceptions to this, but especially in the nonfiction world, publishers are very interested in seeing what you bring to the table in terms of your ability to promote and sell your book. For a lot of my authors, that means hybrid publishing or self-publishing is a better way to go, because it's a fee for service thing where you get to keep total creative control and ownership of your manuscripts. You pay for people to help you publish it, and you have to promote it anyway. So it's honestly, the timeline is faster. You keep the creative control, you keep the ownership. And for a lot of people who are using the book as a marketing tool for their business or to launch a speaker career, the ROI of a book project is not going to come from selling copies anyway. It's going to come from all the other things that you do and can access as a result of having a book and being a credible person in your field. So for most people, traditional publishing is either out of reach or not worth the wait. Now, that said, I still get a lot of people who want to try. And there's nothing wrong with trying. Honestly, if you're writing a nonfiction book, you don't even have to write the whole manuscript to pitch it to publishers. You would actually do a book proposal, which is easier than doing a full manuscript. And then you can see if you can get an agent to represent you, see if you can get interest from a publisher. it could be a very long process, and there's a ton of rejection. I mean, there are famous stories, even like J.K. Rowling got rejected by like a dozen or more publishers before somebody said yes, right? So you have to be prepared for that, to wait. You have to be prepared to be rejected, and you have to have the patience. Because if you have a lot of urgency to get your book out there now, the traditional publishing world's not going to let you do that.
No question about it. All right, I got your contact information up on the screen, Madison. Final question for you today. We may have some aspiring authors and writers. I'm sure we do. They're going to be watching this live or on replay. What's one piece of advice, not about the writing process so much, but more about the importance of guarding their message and helping to foster their message through this process? What's that advice going to be for them? Give me one piece of advice.
Honestly, I think don't be afraid to start talking about it. If a lot of people feel like they need to keep their ideas close to their chest, because if they let it out, maybe somebody will steal it, maybe somebody will scoop their big idea. I would not have that fear. The more you talk about the thing you want to write about, especially in a public way, either on social media or with your family and friends, the more feedback you will get about which parts of it are interesting, which parts of it are confusing. It will help you actually develop the message much more effectively than if you just sit by yourself and try to put it on paper. So if you're thinking about writing something that you want to make an impact on people, start talking about it.
I love it. Thank you so much, ghostwriter and book coach Madison Fitzpatrick. If you guys are watching for the first time and this story or this episode has resonated with you, Madison's information is in the chat, in the comments section as well, and also in the show notes. You can reach out to her, get some tips, maybe perhaps hire her as a ghostwriter. Maybe she can help coach you on your new book. She has 3 free guides on her website, so you definitely want to check those out. But beside that, that's Madison Fitzpatrick. I'm Mr. U. Thanks again for being a part of this conversation, or they call me Mr. U, the podcast, where perspective is the purpose. That's Madison. I'm Mr. U. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching and listening.